session number 29 of ICF travel series Break Free, and today's session is on cycling. The title of the session is My Tryst with Cycling, and our speaker for today is Abhay Hulikavi from Pune. He is a professor, and I would like to thank Jyoti for introducing him to the series. So over to you, Mr. Abhay.
Okay. uh, Thank you so much, Vivek, for having included me in this group and also giving me this opportunity to uh, speak to all of you. Uh, I have attended a few sessions earlier, and I was getting a little concerned and a little anxious because when I looked at some of the other people who have talked and shared their ideas and views and experiences in this forum, uh, I really wasn't sure whether I was the right kind of candidate to be here as a host. But then I said, uh, now that I'm kind of into it, let me just go through with it and let the others decide. So a bit about myself before I actually jump right into the my tryst with cycling, as it says. As Vivek said, uh, I worked as an IT professional for a long time, more than 35 years, and then last few years I've taken a break from a full-time job, and then I do visiting. Uh, I teach it as a visiting faculty at some of the MBA institutes in Pune, and I also do a bit of consulting in the areas of IT services, project management, and such other things. Coming to cycling, it all started, or rather, we started about somewhere in the year 2010. And a precursor to that was the diagnosis of a slipped disc between L4 and L5 and all those vertebras, which actually required me to go through a fairly stringent rehab for almost a year. I was wearing all those lumbar belts and doing physiotherapy and taking all kind of medication. So this all happened in 2008 and 2009, and then obviously one of the things that emerged was that I needed to exercise. I needed to keep myself reasonably fit so that this ailment could, I could handle the ailment without having to undergo surgery. And that's how the cycling restarted. Primarily because it's a no impact exercise. It's a good cardio exercise, and once you start doing it, you realize that there are a lot of other benefits also. It's for example, it's one of the few things that you can do in a group, but you can still be alone. You know, it gives you the good mix of doing things in a group at the same time doing things by yourself. Allows you to explore nearby areas very easily. So that's how it all started in 2010, and it obviously started with very short rides. So my first ride that I did was about 5-6 kilometers. That's how it all started, and then it gradually went up to so since then it has been like about 25 kilometers every alternate day or so, apart from any other exercise that I may do. Towards 2015-16, when I had done some amount of cycling, the thought was, okay, so can I try and do something which is a little more adventurous, little more taxing, little more difficult. And that's when this whole thought of doing the Manali-Leh-Khardungla came up. And as luck could have it, I have a good friend in Pune. His name is Kedar Gupte. He himself is an adventure cyclist, trekker, an avid trekker, and he conducts tours. So he said he was more than happy to take me along. And the good thing with Kedar is that, while he takes people along on all these tours and treks and such other things, he also makes sure that all of us prepare ourselves well for such treks and trips. So while we did this trip sometime in the month of June, July 2017. Uh, Incidentally, I was just looking at the dates, and next Saturday would have been our first day of cycling 4 years back. So we started our trip Manali from Manali on 26th of June 2017, which is exactly 1 week hence. But even though we started in June, our preparation started well ahead in, I think, in Jan 2017, and we started by doing uh, longer and longer rides. So 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers at one go. More importantly, a lot of climbing. So we covered all the ghats which are around Pune. So Pune luckily has a lot of nearby places which one can use for climbing, including, of course, the famous Siagat, which is like the final preparatory test before you take on anything like this. So we did a lot of these trips, including Siagat. We were doing one every fortnight or every month, and that actually helped us prepare both mentally and physically for the for the actual trip. So like the last preparatory trip we did was so we went down to this place called Polatpur, which is in Konkan region, and from there we climbed up to Mahabaleshwar. So that's a good simulation for every day or a daily ride at Manali-Leh. So it's about 40 kilometers. You gain about I would think about 1100 meters of altitude in those 40 kilometers. And that's typically how every day during those 8 9 days of Manali transfer or come out to be. So that's how it all started. And then coming to the ride itself. So this is something started, as I said, on 26th of June 2017. And what I'm going to do is, while I keep talking, I'm also going to share my screen. I have a video which we had made of the entire trip. So it covers each day in about a couple of minutes. So what I'll do is I will uh, I will show the video and also give you a bit of a commentary along with that, and then also add uh, some more tidbits, some anything interesting that comes to my mind. So let me just quickly share my screen, and okay, and I'm going to play the video now. So everyone is able to see the circle of people and a couple of hats here on the screen. Uh, is the screen?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So this, uh, I'll play the video and I'll tell you what this is. So this used to be our morning. So this used to be our morning ritual where we used to do this before actually starting our cycling. This was also to kind of get our spirits going, get some blood circulating and all that. And so this is how it all started. Manali-Leh-Khardungla. This is day one from Manali to this place called Mari, and this is about 33 kilometers, and uh, I think every day we were climbing anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 feet of elevation. This is the campsite. This is where we had stayed when we reached uh, the first campsite. This is the second day where we were going from Mari to Sisu, and so this was via Rohtang Pass. Now, Rohtang Pass is something I think everyone is familiar with. A lot of people visit Rohtang Pass by staying at Manali. Uh, this was again 50 kilometers, about 3,000 feet of elevation gain. And we actually crossed or passed Rohtang Pass while we were going or while we were doing this day. These are some views from the road, and one thing about this ride is that the views are absolutely breathtaking. It's incredible as to what you get to see and what you get to experience. This was the third day when, you know, oh, sorry, this was the second campsite, and this is the waterfall next to our campsite where we were staying. This was the first, sorry, let me just take it back a little bit and pause it here. So the third day was from a place called Sisu to Jispa, about 55 kilometers, again an elevation gain of 3150 feet. Now, one thing I just wanted to kind of explain here is that so when we talk about elevation gain, we're talking about the amount we climbed on that day. Now, as a precaution or as a good practice, when you are doing cycling at high altitude, what is recommended is that you reach an altitude and then you come down on the other side a little bit, and that's where you camp. So even though we were climbing, for example, 3,000 feet or 3,150 feet on a given day, we were not gaining that altitude every day. You know, we would climb 3,150 feet and then lose another maybe 1,000 feet or so while we were descending on the other side, and then we would camp there. So our net gain every day was not 3,000 feet, but perhaps closer to 2,000 or sometimes even 1,500 feet. Uh, it makes it challenging because then you have to climb every day higher altitude or more altitude, but it is useful because it helps in the process of acclimatization. It allows your body to get used to the lesser and lesser oxygen you get as you gain altitude. And I'll show you later on after we've seen the video. I'll show you a chart as to how much the oxygen reduces when one gains altitude. Now, these are some of the better roads that we encountered. These are some of the scenic campsites that we stayed in. This was next to a river, and so this is coming to the fourth day. This is where we went from this place called Jispa to this place called Zingzingba. Now, one thing again to note here is once we pass Rohtang Pass, the traffic density reduced significantly. I mean, up to Rohtang Pass, it was like, we would have a lot of vehicles, buses, cars on the road because Rohtang being a tourist destination. But once the Rohtang Pass is crossed and you're on the other side, then it is only three types of vehicles, I would say. One is people who are actually undertaking this trip from Manali to Leh, either on cycles or motorcycles. That's one category. Second category is the transport vehicles. So we saw a lot of petrol tankers and such trucks which were plying on this road. And the third was, of course, the army vehicles, which were used to ship things across or from one place to another. So this was. Let me just tell you what happened at this point. Yeah. Okay. So this was one waterlogged pass which we had to cross. We were coming from the right side, and there was a sharp, almost like a U-turn. This was a valley, and the water would be flowing from. I mean, when you're watching the screen, it's like watching from the top of the waterfall, water going down, crossing the road, and then further going down. Uh, None of us could actually cross the whole thing on the cycle itself. And at some point of time or at some place here, we lost balance. We had to get down and walk through. Another interesting thing that happened at this point, which we came to know much later, was that so we passed this point, I think around 10:30, 11 in the morning, and then we went ahead and we went to our campsite. Uh, the same day in the afternoon around 2:32 or 3, there was a cloudburst at this place, and this spot or this particular path was blocked for the next 2 days. So nothing could move from on this road for the next 2 days, and we were completely oblivious of this fact. I mean, we had crossed it, we had gone ahead, And the only indication we had that something perhaps was missing was that there was no traffic coming from behind, because this road was blocked. So another interesting experience that we had here. This is how it looked like. This is how uh, and this was further down the road. This is what was called as Chandratal. I mean, Tal is a lake, and uh, uh, La is a pass. So Khardungla means Khardung Pass, as in. So that's why La are passes, and cars are on lakes. Now these are again some of the roads that we had to cross. You'll notice that at places the road condition is pretty pathetic. I mean, it's just about a path which is carved out of the mountains. This again is one of our campsites, which was right at the mouth of a glacier. This is the glacier, and you saw the water flowing, which is where the glacier turned into water. And this was our campsite where we were staying. And in the background is a road. This is Kedar. Let me pause it for a moment. This is Kedar. He's the one who organized the whole thing, and it happened to be his birthday that day. And so we ended up celebrating the birthday by making a makeshift cake, which our support staff was very kind enough to actually make and organize or keep it ready for the dinner. I'll tell you more about the group at the end of the video, and how the support and etc. everything else was organized. Uh, this is day 5, and so this was one of the longer days, and this is also one of the tougher days, because here we were doing much more. We were doing about 67 kilometers. The altitude gain was about, again, 2,500 feet, and we were crossing Barlashla. Now Barlashla is considered to be the second highest motorable pass after Khardungla. It's at 15,912 feet. So, and that day was rainy, foggy. We also had like icicles falling on us, almost like snowfall. This is all snow you can see in the background. Uh, this is this was a terrain. Uh, you might be wondering as to how we have managed to get these shots. So one of the boys with us had a drone. So many of these shots are actually shot from a drone, and that's why you get these beautiful views of the not just the road, but also the valleys and the backdrops which are there for the road. And this is how you can actually get some of the shots where we are cycling, and you can still see some videos and photos being taken. This was the next campsite where we stayed, and this again is part of the surroundings and part of the terrain that we crossed as a part of a journey. Now, day 6 is something which was very interesting. Now, this was again a slightly longer day, 55 kilometers, 3,000 plus feet. Uh, we went via what are called as Gata loops. Now, Gata loops is so it's a and of course the other pass, Lachungla. Now, Gata loops. Let me quickly take you to. Just a second. I'm going to try and show you some photographs of Gata loops, because so Gata loops is it's like a ghat section where you have these U-turns. Uh, Only thing is there are 21 U-turns one has to kind of complete to reach the top. And when you look at it from the top, it looks like a huge snake, which is kind of uh, which is lazing, or which is lying on the ground in its with all its length, twisted and turned around. Yeah. So can you see the photograph? I hope so. So these are the Gata loops. You can see, it starts somewhere here, and then, or rather, actually here, and then every U-turn, actually, you keep climbing, and then you keep coming up and up, and then this is where it all ends by Uh, and you will also notice that while in some places the road is very good, and there are places where you can only make out that there was a road. I mean, there's nothing to say that it is a road, but there are some remains of the road. So that was Gata loops, and that's what we climbed. This is some of us climbing the loops, as and these are some of the shots of the Gata loops. Uh, we really admired these truck drivers. I mean, one, they were extremely careful when they passed us, never ever bothered or troubled us. Secondly, like see, for example, you can see this person actually stopped for us to let go. They would be courteous and nice enough to do that, even though we were on cycles and they were in much bigger vehicles. But that is something we observed and noted all through the trip, that even though the larger trucks, larger trolleys, larger buses, they were extremely courteous and very, very careful about allowing the other person to pass and not pushing their way through. Another thing that I would like to, you see the bridges here, and these are the bridges that we crossed. Uh, Almost, not almost, I mean, I would say all the bridges that we crossed were all iron girder bridges. So they were not concrete bridges. They were bridges which were built with, which were built like a frame and a structure, and they were just planted across the rivers or the streams or the water bodies. This is part of, this is considered one of the most difficult roads. So if anyone has seen this program called, uh, I think, 10 most difficult roads in the world, I think came on Discovery. This road is one of those. It features in that program as one of the roads which is one of, which is considered the most difficult. We're coming towards the end of our trip. This is day 7. Let me just pass this because this is some fooling around happening at the campsite, which we needed just to keep our spirits high. Uh, yeah. So this was the 7th day, which was, I think, 2 days before we reached Leh, where we went from Pang to Sokar. Now, Sokar is a lake. It's a saltwater lake. Uh, it is at 10,000, I think 10 or 11,000 feet of height. Luckily, this day the climbing was not much. Uh, the distance also was not much, 44 kilometers, 1,000 feet. And we reached what are called as Mori Plains. Now, the interesting thing about Mori Plains is that, so this is actually a flat terrain after doing all this climbing. And it is flat, meaning it's absolutely flat. So you can see for miles together in the distance, and you might see this, see it in the, when you see the video. So this is where we were still climbing. We were going up the Mori Plains, or to reach the Mori Plains. This was the climb. And this is the scene you get from the top when you are climbing up and going up. Still climbing, you can make out from the speed of cyclists uh, how steep the climb is, because the road doesn't. And this is where we reach the Mori Plains. And now you can see, for example, how flat the whole thing is. This is our entire group of 15 people. Uh, Again, this is a drone shot, so that's why you can see all of us cycling. And interesting thing about these plains is that it has these wild donkeys called kiangs. And yeah, so these are the plains, and I'll just, you'll get a shot of these kiangs, which we were able to capture only because we had a drone. So these are the kiangs. You can see how small they look from where we were. We were able to look at or spot them only as like dots, and all these close-ups and all are possible because the drone could fly close to them. Uh, to give you a sense of perspective, they were almost a kilometer or maybe even more than a kilometer away from where we were standing. So we could barely see them as dots, and just about that. This is how they looked when perhaps one were able to get closer to them. These are all wild donkeys that you encounter, and this is when we reached our campsite, which is next to this lake called Sokar. Uh, it's a saltwater lake, so, and we had stayed next to it. I'll try and see if I can show you some photographs of that after we finish the video. I have lots of photos, so that's a bit of a challenge. Uh, this was our second last day where we went from Suka to Lato, and again here we crossed this uh, pass Tanglangla, one of the highest. I think the third or the fourth highest pass, 17,582 feet. Long distance, 60 kilometers, 2,000 feet of climbing. So this was another challenging day for all of us in terms of the cycling that we had to undertake. This was again. So this is the pass. This is the Tanglangla where one reaches the peak and then drops to the other side. And now you can see the other side because obviously, and you can make out from the speed and cyclists as to whether we are going uphill or downhill. This was all piled up snow. Again, snow on the other side. Wet roads, so we had to be careful. And but luckily, the road condition was pretty good, and therefore, good good fun ride we could have. You can see some motorcyclists who are doing the same ride. Uh, this is all downhill, so that's why you see us all enthusiastic and speedy. Not the same when we were climbing up. And this was our last day, last but one day, I would say, when we covered almost 76 kilometers, about 2,000 feet of height. So relatively flat surface, very good roads, probably the best roads in the entire 9 day journey uh, before we reach Leh. And absolutely stunning views. So I mean, you'll see some of those as we go through. So we had a river passing by. There were monasteries that we passed. So this is the monastery that we passed, which was on the other side of the river, and we were on this road. And this is how we came along. And then finally the last day, which was the 10th day, where we had to climb 6,000 feet in 38 kilometers, which is uh, extremely tough. And this is, of course, the highest motorable road. I think most of us know about this as to and have heard about this. The thing about this 38 kilometers is that the first 20, 24, 22 kilometers are quite good. I mean, the road is quite good like this. But beyond that, the last 15 kilometers also, the road is quite bad. This is the kind of view you get when you are at the top. I mean, actually, you can actually see planes flying below your eye level because you are at such a height. And there are a lot of military planes flying here and there when you are on this road, and you do get to see them. This is the distance to Khardungla top. This is the road to Khardungla, and you can kind of see these are the vehicles passed, and this is finally where we ended up taking a group photo. Uh, this is the entire group. I'll also tell you the names of the others as soon as I'm done with the video. And this is where it all ended for us. Uh, is there anything more I need to show you? No. So, yeah, let me come back to. Okay, so I hope you guys at least got a. Okay, there is a chat message I missed. Okay, thanks, Natasha. It was wow. Yes, I mean, no other words to describe it. A few things. I mean, as I said, it's absolutely a stunning experience, and I mean, we have spoken to a lot of people. I mean, we still are in touch. All the 15 people who went together, and every time we talk, the subject inevitably comes to the topic of when do we do it again, and you know, uh, I mean, we probably would have done it last year or even this year if it hadn't been for the lockdowns and other things. But it is that fascinating and it's that captivating. I mean, the kind of changes you see, the kind of so every day is a new experience. Every day is a new terrain. Every day is a new landscape. Every day you see different colors, different skies, and so on and so forth. So, a few things about why this is considered as one of the most challenging rides. So, one is of course the climbing that one has to do. See, when you cycle, normally what happens is when you cycle in normal conditions, you typically do encounter climbs, but then you also encounter downslopes. So you do get a fair amount of time to recover and catch your breath and regain your strength. When you're doing these kind of climbs, you're climbing for like 10 kilometers at a stretch, 15 kilometers at a stretch, you don't get any breather at all. I mean, you are constantly pedaling and constantly going at it. So it requires a different approach to cycling. So the key there is maintaining a steady pedaling speed, maintaining a steady breathing rate, not overexerting oneself, so that you are able to complete the climb. And that takes a bit of a practice, and that's where Kedar's insistence that we do all these climbs before we started the trip certainly helped us, because that gave us an idea as to and each one has to figure out one's own comfort. So what speed one is comfortable with, what gears one is comfortable with, uh, and so on and so forth. So that is one thing. The second thing, which is which is very very significant, is this thing about the oxygen levels. So let me just share my screen again, and uh, let me show you a chart which let me okay. Hmm. Sorry, I forgot to. I'm just looking at the chart. So basically, what happens is when you are at an altitude and when you are, as you gain altitude, the oxygen density drops. So the amount of oxygen in the air reduces significantly. And so it's about, so we all know from our science that at the sea level, you have about 20-21% of oxygen in the air. As you start climbing, it starts dropping. And for example, when we are at the altitude of, let's say, Khardungla, which is at 15,000 or 16,000 feet, it is down to about 10%, roughly half of what you have at the sea level. Uh, and generally, up to 3,000 meter of elevation or just below the level of Leh, one can survive or one can manage without too much of a difficulty. But the moment you are beyond 3,000 meters, the reduced oxygen definitely uh, affects you. Natasha, I've just noted your question. I'll answer it once I'm done with this explanation. Part of it is also what I'm talking about. So that's the reason why building endurance is very, very important. Ability to uh, so basically increasing your cardiovascular fitness is very, very important when you have to undertake something like this. Another very important thing, and that's I think what I mentioned even during our video, was that uh, when you do this, when you gain altitude, the rule is that you reach a peak so that you kind of acclimatize the body to go up to a certain height, but then you climb down a little bit and then spend the night at a lower altitude. So it is like you start from say 5,000 feet, you climb to 7,000 feet, that's the maximum altitude you gain, and then you come down to 6,000 feet and spend the night at 6,000 feet. And then the next day again you climb 2,000 feet, you go up to 8,000 feet, then again down 1,000 feet and spend the next night at 7,000 feet. So effectively, even though you are climbing higher, the night you are spending not at the highest level of the climb, but at a slightly lower level. So this kind of a cycle allows the body to get used to this lower levels of oxygen over a period of time. And that's what happened with us also, because we spent about 8 days moving from Manali to Leh, which is like going from 6,000 feet to uh, Manali is about 11,000 feet. So 6,000 feet of elevation gain, we were able to do it in 9 days. But then, while it was only 6,000 feet of gain, we were actually, if you saw the actual climbing, we did much more than that. And that was because we climbed and then we descended, and then we climbed and again descended. So that's how one kind of take care of the uh, reduced levels of oxygen. But that is something one has to be very careful about. Uh, Natasha, I'll try and answer this question. She has this question about how do you train, and I think also this question whether 6 months preparation was that's from Jyoti. Uh, okay, first I'll answer Jyoti. Jyoti, while 6 months, yes, does seem less. It was not that we were starting from scratch, so we were reasonably fit in a sense. Now, I would leave the definition of reasonably fit to everyone. Uh, Reasonably fit means like, most of us could very easily cycle about 60, 70 kilometers and not feel too bad about it at the end of it. So at least and 60, 70 kilometers of not completely flat, some climbs, some drops. And so we were at that stage before we started preparing. And the 6 months were then focused primarily on gaining experience in climbing heights, climbing ghats. So, as I said, I mean, around Pune, there are a lot of these climbs which you can undertake because Pune has a lot of hills around it. So, and we did pretty much all of them, you know, on a fortnightly or a monthly basis. So every fortnight we would go climb one ghat and come back. Katraj, which is like a very common ghat one has to encounter to leave, go towards Bangalore from Pune. We did that practically every fortnight. And that allowed us to get some level of practice. Another thing is, I mean, this was not just cycling that we did. We also did some amount of other exercise in terms of building strength, building flexibility. So besides cycling, we were also doing other exercises so that we were able to prepare ourselves well for this. That is for Jyoti to answer her 6 month preparation question. Natasha, as I said, yes, I mean, two, three things one has to really focus on. One is the cardiovascular fitness, which is building, your ability to sustain an activity for a long time. Also building strength, because the stronger you are, the longer you can sustain an activity. So, doing weight training, doing strength training is also very important. Lastly, but perhaps not in the least, is also the mental preparation. I mean, uh, you know, during some of these climbs, we kind of reached a Zen state where we had no idea what we were doing. We were simply breathing, pedaling, and going on the road. And they say that is probably the best state to be in when you are climbing, because then you're like an autopilot. You're just climbing. Your body doesn't feel a thing. You and everything is like synchronized. Your breathing is synchronized, your pedaling speed is synchronized, your so cycling speed is steady, and one kind of tries to achieve that stage, and that also comes when you do some amount of mental preparation, uh, where you don't give up so easily. You kind of uh, push yourself a little beyond what you think you're capable of doing. And in that case, and in that sense, being in a group also helps, because you have some others around you. You see somebody else going ahead of you, you can try and follow that. Group also tends to have, so when you are in a group, people always encourage you. They'll keep pushing you. They'll keep suggesting, okay, one more climb, one more. So one of the techniques that we used, for example, when we were doing these difficult climbs was uh, pedal for 1 minute, stop for half a minute, take a break. or pedal for 3 minutes and then take a break, pedal for 4 minutes and take a break. And you know, the to develop that uh, discipline or to develop that kind of thinking, you probably need to do some practice as well. And that's where the other good thing that happened was, many of these practice rides we did as a group. So those, all the 15 people who were in the uh, were there for the trip. Many of our practice rides were done in the same group. So we got to know each other very well. We got to spend time with each other. We knew who was capable of doing what, who was perhaps a little weak. So it gave us time to kind of get adjusted to each other, and that also certainly helped. So that is something that I think uh, all these things put together is probably what helped us in terms of our preparation for the whole trip. What else I wanted to cover? Yeah, so I talked about oxygen. I talked about height, and yeah, I think I've been talking for a long time, so I think I'll probably now take a pause and uh, take any questions you may have, any comments you may have, so that uh, okay. Uh, Okay, Jyoti again has two questions. One is oxygen tanks, etc., and eligibility criteria. So, yes, good you asked me, because so we were the way the trip was organized was, when Kedar was our local contact. He has again an agency in Manali. The gentleman is he runs his own company which undertakes these tours. He himself is uh, multiple times Everestier. So, he's a trained mountaineer who has climbed Mount Everest multiple times, and his team accompanied us. So, we had support vehicles which carried our luggage, which also helped us with pitching of the tents, cooking of the food, generally making ourselves, I would say, not just making comfortable. It was like we were spoiled. We are really, really spoiled by these people in terms of the amount of food they gave us, the amount of care they took of us. So apart from the cycling, we really didn't have to do anything at all. We were all very, very well taken care of. So we had all the necessary emergency equipment, including oxygen cans and such other things. The leader from their side was also a trained mountaineer, trained in all the necessary first aid and such other things. Now, all of them were, in fact, the entire support staff was, people who not only were trained in mountaineering, but they were trainers themselves. So uh, all of them knew how to handle basic emergencies. Most importantly, before we left for the tour, uh, this gentleman, Hemaraj, was the name of the person who runs this company. And he actually spent an hour with us, and with some very, very explicit instructions, where he said that, uh, I mean, all of you are very, big people, old people, etc., etc. But he said, when it comes to the tour, when it comes to weather, when it comes to decisions related to cycling, stopping, continuing, staying, etc., the tour leader was his nephew, I think. He said his decision will be final. If he says this is what we will do, that is exactly what will happen. You will not argue, you will not question, you will simply follow his instructions. So, for example, if he says that, okay, I think you don't seem to be doing too well, I think you should stop cycling and get into the car. He said, I don't want anyone arguing with him. You have to stop there and get into the car. Because he said, we know this area much better than you do, and we know what can lead to what. So at some level, there was also a lot of discipline that was built into the whole thing. So while we were extremely well taken care of, we were very, very well prepared. You won't believe, before we reached our campsite, our camps were, the tents were pitched, the hot food was waiting for us. Everything on the campsite used to be ready even before we could reach the campsite. And this happened 9 days. On every one of those 9 days before we could reach the camps, even while during the trip, we would be at appropriate times. Every about 3 hours or so, they would stop us and force us to eat. And there was no argument. I mean, they would actually give us a packet and say that, okay, you start only when you finish the packet, because the nutrition is necessary. I mean, what happens at that altitude is you don't feel hungry. You also lose a lot of water. Dehydration is very severe, and you don't realize it. And I mean, at some level, they were almost like mothering us, saying, okay, this is what you do, this is what you eat, this is what you drink, and that's it. Coming to the eligibility criteria, there is really speaking no specific criteria, except that I think one would perhaps get a go ahead from one's personal physician or a doctor. Age, I don't think there is any criteria, because I was 55 when I did that. I was the oldest amongst our group, but I know people who have done this in their 60s also. So age is not really a criteria. It's just about what kind of physical state you are in. And it's always better to get a doctor's go ahead before one can embark on something like this.
So thanks, Abhay, for a wonderful presentation. But I think you seem to have forgotten to show us the photographs.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, there are tons of them. I mean, literally tons of them. I'll just scroll through those so that you get a sense of how. Uh, so this is something I showed you of the Gata loops. Uh, so this is the top of the Gata loops. You can see 21 loops. Height is 15,302 meters. Sorry, feet. This is our tour leader, Kedar Gupte. He's the one who had organized. That's his company, Green Earth. Anyone wants to know more about this, please feel free to get back to me. I'll be very happy to help you with any help or any contacts, details, etc. This is again Kedar. This was again some of the Gata loops. Let me just minimize this so that you get to see all the photographs together. Uh, it's taking a little time to load because this is on Google Drive. So, okay. So this is, for example, this was our group, the seniors in the group, I would say. Let me just enlarge this. This is me, and these are my friends. He was the second oldest, and so second oldest meaning the other person was above 40. All others are below 40 when we undertook that trip. Uh, this is our campsite, Gata loops. One thing I must mention is so all these roads are maintained by. I'm going to keep scrolling through photos. So if you want to stop me, and I'll keep talking also. So all these roads are maintained by this organization called Border Roads Organization, BRO. You will find that name cropping up everywhere from time to time, and they do an incredible job. Uh, the thing with this road is that this road is closed during winters because all of it is ice locked or snow locked. All so. For example, this patch you see here is like this because snow would have covered all this, and when the snow melts and the water flows, it takes part of the road with it. So much of the road which is built is washed away post the winter when the summer sets in. Typically, what they do is once the snow is melted, they actually come up to these points, make this at least drivable, so that people can at least start traveling on it, and then the road opens. And typically, it opens somewhere in the month of June, towards the end of June. I mean, right now is probably the time when they're talking about opening the Manali-Leh route. So if you just run a search on Google, you might get some updates about the road being open, the road about to open, etc. And typically it starts towards the end of June and then it continues till September, October, November. but they do an incredible job. I mean, the kind of terrain they have to take care of, and the kind of places where they have to create these roads, it's amazing, and they work tirelessly. I mean, at some places it is there is no option. I mean, they actually have to do it physically, manually. So every day in the morning when we would leave, we would see a lot of these trucks carrying all these labor people, including women, who would be going towards these places where the road needed repairs. And then again, we would see a lot of teams actually working on the roads, many times with their bare hands, and making sure that the road was leveled, flattened, some kind of layers were established and then tarred. So I would say the total distance is about 450 kilometers. 150 kilometers, very good. 150 kilometers, okay. The remaining 150 kilometers are really bad. I mean, bad as in many times we were cycling without sitting on the seat because the bumps were too hard to tolerate while you were sitting. So we would rather stand and pedal than sit and pedal. So the roads could get as bad as that. So some more photographs, and so this is Nakila, another of the pass. Basically, every day we were passing some peak and then going to the other side. So every day there was some pass or some law that we crossed, and went to the other side. That's La Chungla. Mm, This is how typically some of the bad roads are. You can see now this is just about a road, and you can see that it's wet, and also because the snow around and the melted snow causes a lot of erosion. Uh, this is completely, so there is no tar. This is just a path which is carved out of the mountainside. Mm. If you want, I'll send you this link of the Google Drive. So those of you who are interested, you can always look at these photos at leisure because there are so many of them. All of us actually, whatever photos we had, we all put them together and just uploaded them in the Google Drive because that was the easiest way of gathering them together. So this was one of those shots of the most difficult road. So there are places where it's almost like a tunnel, except that there's one side missing. So it's like you're driving through a sea, and so three sides, there is top, there is side, and then there's the road, and then one side is the valley. And these are very narrow roads, by the way, so just about enough to let two vehicles pass. These are some of the sights you get to see, which are like absolutely breathtaking. This was at the Mori Plains, as I mentioned. This is the entire group, 15 of us. Me on this side, Kedar, and the rest of the gang. Incidentally, the video I showed you is also on YouTube. So those of you who want to have a look at it again, you can also see that. I'll send the link as well. This used to be our support staff. So interesting thing about this support team also. I mean, look at the kind of discipline they would follow. So we had 4 vehicles, 1 truck and 3 jeeps. Now the practice was 1 truck, which would be with the food, water, all the other stuff, tents, etc., and 1 jeep would go further forward and would reach the campsite much before us and set up the camp. The 2 other vehicles, 2 other jeeps, were the support vehicles. Now the way they would do it is, so the first jeep would always be ahead of the first rider, and the last jeep the second jeep would always be behind the last rider. So we were always sandwiched between the 2 jeeps. So as soon as the first rider crossed the jeep in the front and went some distance ahead, they would wait some time, maybe 15-20 minutes for them, so the rider to go some distance ahead, start and move forward, cross the rider, maybe travel for a few kilometers, for 3-4 kilometers, and stop and wait for the rider to cross them again. Until the rider crossed, they would not move. The last person had probably the worst job in the world because he could never ever cross the last cyclist. So his thing was they would wait, he would let the last cyclist go, and he would start as soon as he had crossed the last cyclist. Generally, he would make sure that we were not out of sight. I mean, he would go only so much ahead that he was able to see us, and then stop, and then allow the last few cyclists to cross and go further, wait for some time, and again do the same thing. So this person was always the last person to reach the campsite, and this they religiously followed for the last, all the 9 days, which is really incredible. I mean, it used to be cold, it used to be wet, and they had really nothing to do. I mean, they just had to wait for us to keep cycling, and our cycling speeds were anywhere between about 6, 7, 8 kilometers per hour because of the climbing. So you can imagine how slow the whole thing must have. And but in spite of all that, this last person would never ever cross us. Idea being, if something were to happen, all the cyclists were always between the two vehicles. So they could always come back, or the last person could come forward so that any emergency could be handled. So again, something that that was a good learning for us in terms of how such things can be organized and managed well. Um, this is this is the video that you saw. This is the photograph, the still from that on the Mori place. You can see how large. So this distance across could be easily 3, 4 kilometers. I mean, the photo is very difficult to imagine how far it is. But this is easily 3 to 4 kilometers across from the road to the base of this mountain. And like you saw, the road just stretches, I mean, into infinity. You just can't see the end of it. It just goes on and on and on, and for as long as or as far as you can see. These are some sheeps. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, I'm going to stop sharing. What I'll do is I'll put both these links in the chat so that anyone who wants to have a look definitely can have a look.
Thanks, Abhay, and maybe we can have a comment from Sudhanshu, because last session we did with Sudhanshu, and he is also a cyclist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I would be very happy to hear it from him.
Hi guys, hi Abhay, hi Vivek.
Hi Sudhanshu.
Am I audible to you guys?
No, your audio is breaking.
Yeah, hi. Really, uh, Vivek, give me a moment. I'll get the internet sorted and come back.
Okay. So Abhay, maybe you can take Jyoti along when you recreate this trip, or maybe you go on some other trip.
I was about to message her post the meeting saying that why don't we do it next year again? I'm more than happy. In fact, not just Jyoti, I mean, anyone else who wants to come with me. So as you've seen, age is not a real barrier. I did it when I was 55, and I really don't see anyone very.
And who was the youngest in the group?
So we were 15 of us. The youngest two were two first-year engineering students, Atharv and I forget the other person's name. They were the youngest.
And how did this group come together? This group of 15 people.
Actually, the common denominator was Kedar, because Kedar was known to all these people. So basically, what happened was, Kedar does these tours every year, and so when he got these inquiries from different people, and uh, in our case also, what happened was somebody asked, and then when he said yes, this person. So for example, in our group, 4 or 5 of us, one person asked, and when he heard from Kedar that he was organizing it, he started talking amongst us, and then these 4 or 5 of us came together, and so that's how. So it was like these small pockets which connected with Kedar, and then these pockets then came together. So one group which was us, the seniors, so to say. So I was there. Another person, friend of mine called Jayant, who was, I think, at that time just past 50. Nitin was 42, 43. The girls, Shalaka, then Jagruti, and so they were, late 30s. So the youngest amongst our group was about 31 or 32. And then the other group was all, so the two youngest, as I said, were the two boys who were first year engineering students. And the others were about 23, 24, 25, just out of uh, graduation, getting into post graduation and those kind of things. So fairly, so obviously uh, those guys were way ahead of us. I mean, they would typically reach the campsite at least an hour or two before we did. So it was a given. I mean, they would have reached, they would have changed, they would have had a nap, all kind of things they would have done by the time we reached. So, but in any case, it was never considered. So the thing is, this is not considered as a race. I mean, it's just you and your ability to cycle. So at no point of time anyone really talked about how fast or how soon or how quick. It was all about basically starting and reaching the destination. So uh, that way it was very, very good. Expenses, okay. Double. So 4 years back, the trip, the one that so okay. So there are two parts to the expenses. Generally, these trips are from Manali to Leh. So my trip, so the trip from Manali to Leh, including a couple of extra days in Leh for just recovering and maybe doing a little bit of sightseeing. In 2017, it cost me 55,000 rupees, but this was all inclusive. So including the cycle rental, including the support, including food, including accommodation at Leh, everything else. What we had to additionally spend was the travel from Pune to Chandigarh and from Leh to back to Pune. So uh, from Chandigarh, they had arranged for a bus to take us to Manali, so that was also included. So the additional expenditure for us, besides this 55,000, was uh, Pune to Chandigarh by flight, and then again from Leh to Pune by flight. That was the only additional expenses. This main trip was 55,000 all inclusive, and it really was all inclusive. I mean, we really did have to. I mean, there was no place where we could spend any money. So for those 9-10 days, so there was no question of spending any money. But even otherwise, absolutely nothing had to be shared. And uh, the good thing was we had absolutely top class support. The cycles were excellent, so we really had a real top end mountain bikes. They were, I think, Trek, if I'm not mistaken, make with the widest possible tire possible. Because the roads are so bad that our cycles wouldn't really survive there. So uh, all with a 9x3 gear combination, hydraulic brakes. Hydraulic brakes are again very important because when you're going downhill, hydraulic disc brakes are far more reliable than normal rim brakes. So uh, considering, I mean, given so that 55,000 included all these things.
Thanks, Abhay, and we are happy to have Sudhanshu back. So, Sudhanshu, can you please share your comments? Because I think you have done some part of this trip, as you had mentioned in your last uh, session. I think his video is frozen.
Mm.
So, Jasminder, can we have your comments? You are from Goa, and cycling seems to be a
Oh yes,
very like in a lot
in
of
vogue. I
people
mean, I've
a lot.
started following Saksti riders, and they seem to be doing fantastic when it comes to riding practically every day.
Yeah, yeah. Like Goa seems to be
Yes.
the place for cycling.
Right. So, hi. I'm not in Goa. It's a small correction. I'm in Bangalore. I used to live in Goa.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
Right. Yeah, but my husband's from Pune and he's also very fond of cycling. So he's been kind of listening in a little bit here and there. He's very, I think sometime in the future, his dream is to do the same trip. I'm sure he can cycle it. I don't think I can ever, not even in my
you
dreams.
can join us in the support vehicle.
Yes, that I can. Yeah, yeah. I can be the cheerleader. That's for
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. I want to know the names of your beagles.
Beagles.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Coffee and Ellie.
Coffee and Ellie. How cute.
Yes,
How
they're
nice.
sisters.
Okay.
So Coffee came to us when she was 45, 50 days. So she's been with us right from the beginning.
Right.
Ellie is from the same litter, but she was with some other families and we had some challenges in keeping her.
Right.
So we adopted her when she was about 2 years old. So, and
Okay.
now both of them are a little over 5 years old. 5.5 actually. They're born in Jan, so five and a
Oh,
half years.
okay. All right. So cute.
Are you fond of dogs?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We have
Oh,
a
okay.
Lhasa Apso.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he rules the house. So,
Absolutely. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
right. Right. I think Sudhanshu's here.
Yes, I think Sudhanshu is
Yeah,
back.
Sudhanshu is back, and Dhaval Matthew is mentioning that he has done Hyderabad Mumbai in 2012.
Oh, wow. That's uh, that's some distance. That would be
Yes.
almost more than 1,000 kilometers, right?
No, no. I did out of that around 449 kilometers. Hyderabad to
Okay.
Sholapur, and Sholapur to Pune. I was almost dead, so I took a bus, and then Pune to Bombay again. So
Okay.
449 in
Okay.
3 days.
3 days. Wow. That's impressive.
Okay, just a thought to chip in. That's it.
Oh yes.
Yes,
Uh,
Sudhanshu.
yes, Sudhanshu.
Hi, Abhay. We
Hi.
finally might
Able to.
interact.
Yes.
There is very bad network here in Goa,
Okay.
and I just wanted to take a quick moment and congratulate you for doing this. And it was a wonderful presentation. The footages were so amazing that it took me back to those days in 2017 when I rode through this
Mhm.
place with
Oh,
my
you wrote
own
in
luggage.
2017, is it? Same year.
Yeah. Oh, same year. Okay, great.
Oh, great.
I do it, the self-supported way.
Yes.
So I carry all my stuff on the bicycle, which is
Which
my
is
own
heavy.
style. Uh, but nevertheless, the journey matters and the people you meet matters. So really, really amazing journey, and especially the way you showed it, it was pretty amazing. I would want to do it this way once and meet all these
Please do.
guys.
I mean, I would be more than happy. I think, I mean, we can convince Jasminder's husband, Jyoti seems to be interested. Why don't we target 2022?
Yeah, don't forget me, please. I'm in the support staff.
Oh, you are, of course, the main,
Yes.
so you're the cheerleader, so we can't
Absolutely.
really miss you.
Aja, one question I wanted to ask Abhay. I think
Yes.
on one part you said you did Soker Lake as well. Is it? Was it on the route or you basically
Okay,
because
yes, yes,
Soker is
yes.
on a different side. It's on the eastern side of Ladakh.
No,
So
Sokar is there. I think eastern side of Ladakh is, I think, Pangong or.
there are two
Uh,
lakes, Soker and Somoriri.
no,
So
see, Sokar was definitely on the route, even though, I mean, not on the route as in not walking distance from where we were there. So we camped and then we drove about a kilometer or two to reach the banks of the lake. Incidentally, this is a salt water lake, so you actually have salt deposits on the banks.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Um, so Sokar was definitely on the route.
Okay.
Maybe you were solo, so I guess you never really had the luxury of someone putting you in a car and taking you uh, to the lake itself. I mean, you probably camped very close to the roads most of the time because Sokar campsite was also a little away from the main road. Now, in fact, I would think almost a couple of kilometers away from the main.
So what I know is that there is a place called Dibring,
Mhm.
and from Dibring you take a right towards the eastern side of Ladakh towards Somoriri and Soker.
Okay.
and that is where Tanglangla is, nearby to that. So I am assuming that you I
We
don't know if
probably
you.
took that route. I mean, I'm not
Yes,
so
yes,
familiar
yes.
with the geography. So,
It's a little
and
off inside.
okay, possible. So we probably took that route, and then from there we reached Ladakh. So
Yeah, I
quite
got a little
possible.
confused, how I missed that. So, but yeah,
So
thanks for sharing a bit.
yeah.
Thanks, really.
So we can do it next time.
He's a photographer, so you can also like he
Oh,
will be
great.
able to capture the footage also.
Wonderful. So, I mean, for a photographer, this is like heaven. I mean, you would really be spoiled for choice. You could never ever take enough photographs of that place. It's so beautiful. And at the same time, I really don't know whether a photograph will ever do justice to that place. I mean, Sudhanshu can comment on it. But one of the things,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, one reason why I actually stopped taking photographs was because, the photo would not do even like 10% justice to the actual view. So,
True, true. Absolutely agree with you. And I have a little story to share with from
mhm,
my first tour I did, which
mhm,
was Jaipur to Kanyakumari. And
hmm,
I happen to be a professional photographer. So for me that 42 days were an escape from my usual job, which was photography.
hmm,
So on the way, I actually purposefully didn't took out my camera, and I purposefully just watched at the place where I would just photograph.
hmm.
So some moments were there in which I realized they should not be captured through the camera. Rather, I should just enjoy the
Remember
moment and let it
those.
pass.
Yes,
So
yes.
similarly in Ladakh also there are so many amazing views. Each turn will make you
Yes.
stop and it will like, oh, this should be captured. But in that moment, it's like if you really want to enjoy, the best way is to enjoy it through your eyes.
True, true. Very true. I agree.
Jaideep here. Can I put in a word?
Yes, sure,
Please.
sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jaswinder's husband, and I completely can understand what you all have been talking about because I've uh, I've been there. In fact, I've flown aircraft there,
Oh,
and it's the what you were talking about, 3-4 kilometers, not being able to judge the distance because the air is so clear that one of the primary ways in which humans does distance, which is by the blurring of objects, it is
yes,
missing because
yes,
it
yes.
just disorients you completely.
Completely.
And my lasting memory is only of those block colors. There's a block blue, there's a
Yes.
block brown, and then you have this turquoise of the rivers. Sometimes some of the rivers are in turquoise. Actually, my dad was posted there many years back in
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Patapur, the Shiok beyond Thois. So it is definitely on the bucket list. Could you find some way in which you can send a word around when you plan your next trip?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would be more than happy to. I'll keep that in mind. I'll definitely let you know because uh, visiting that place again is, it's a given. I mean, I don't think I will miss out on that in any case. So most likely next year. So I'll definitely let you know. I will keep that in mind. I would have your details from Vivek, so not to worry. Uh, and I'll also stay in touch so that as things progress, I can keep you posted.
And maybe some suggestions on some kind of a workup schedule, some kind of
Oh
target.
yes, yes, yes.
That maybe if you could do it now itself, so that there's a full year to work up towards that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because I'm a kind of an exercise cyclist. I'm not sure where I stand with respect to what is needed for that.
Mhm, mhm. Uh, if you really ask me, I don't think there is anything very significantly special needed. It's just that uh, a certain basic level of fitness. I mean, from what I see of you, at least on the video, you do look like somebody who exercises regularly or who's fond of exercise. And if that is the case, then I think maintaining that and maybe increasing some amount of intensity as you come closer to the right time is all that is needed. But anyways, I'll share whatever details I have with you. I'll certainly share them with
Thanks, Abhay. And our ex-presenter Hasib wants to ask a question. Yes,
you. Yes,
Hasib, please go ahead.
please. Absolutely.
Yeah, coming back to the question of photography, like the photographer, one of the photographer friends said that nothing can beat. I think it was Sudhanshu who said
Yes.
that nothing can beat what you can capture with that. 30 years, believe me, I've been in the wildlife and I've been studying and tracking and chasing tigers, lions, and leopards. And I never had a camera. There's no better camera than your eyes when you go out on
Eyes.
the excursions and ventures. And everyone has been keeping on asking me, even in my our last webinar with Vivek, and they said probably one or two people came around and said that there are no pictures, and I said never took pictures except with my cell phone. So such beautiful excursions, such adventures, they really need your eyes. They don't need the lens or any gadget around with
Completely.
you, and that's the best way you can enjoy. So well done. I mean, if you're enjoying
Completely.
it with your eyes, and if you're really feeling it and taking it along with your heart all through, nothing like it. No
Completely.
offense to any photographer friends, though.
Thanks, Asif. And it was a nice presentation. I would say Abhay made very good use of the video while he narrated and gave us a commentary. That was the comment I shared with him when he had sent me the video. The first time I told him there should have been a script
Yeah,
along
there
with
was
the
no
video.
script. I kind of went along the flow, but thank you.
And next week we will have Ritik Gupta from Trocals. So
Mhm.
Trocals basically means travel with locals. So that's a concept that has come up, and his talk will focus on Uttar Pradesh, the lesser known places of UP. Like one of the points that he has mentioned in his PPT that he has already shared in advance with me, that there, like, we don't have any ocean in UP, but there is a beach in UP. So those
Hmm.
kind of interesting facts and photographs he is going to share with us. And Abhay, before you leave us, I have a request. If you can play that video again
Mhm.
and play the sound also, because the music of that video is very good. So you can we
um,
can, we can all
so if I
end the session on a musical note.
absolutely just one question: if I play the sound, you will be able to hear it, right? I mean, I don't have to do anything else.
Yeah, you have to try then see how it goes.
Yeah, okay. Let me do that.
Otherwise, Sudhanshu or Hasib and even Murugraj, they can help us.
When you share the video, there is an option that says
Mhm.
hello. Do you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Before you, I mean, as you share the video,
Uh-huh.
on the share screen, you will see the options available for you to share. At the
Okay.
bottom, you will have an option to that says share audio or something like that. Do you see
Okay,
that?
okay, okay, okay. Advanced sharing
Just click on share
options.
screen. You will have a dialog box. At the
Okay.
bottom, there will be a link that says there will be an option that
Share computer sound. Yes, you got. Absolutely. Yes. Done. I found it, so I'll play it now. Share computer sound. Optimize screen sharing from. Okay, that's. I'll click it anyways. And screen. And here we go. So thank you very much again. And I guess on this happy note, uh, we will close.
हनुमंताने केला फूल सगळे धोंडे गेले खोल परंतु तेही आले वर जेव्हा त्याने लिहिले वर राम राम राम.
बरं ब्राउनी कुठे गेली?
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ketan. Happy birthday to you. Okay, today is day 7.
One word.
One word.
One word answer.
Sun. Day 7. No clouds. परत प्लीज कट करून
Never thought that we'd go this far. Don't stop now. Reaching for a distant star. Don't stop now. Isn't it strange how we're safe and home? So that I counting days until the second call. If you're gonna make a change, you have to let me know. Turn this shit around, just start to top the lungs. It's all you need to do.
Thanks a lot, Abhay, for sharing your experiences with us. This video was a much needed tonic to the eyes and the ears. And thanks to all the participants for attending our
Same here,
session.
absolutely.
So see you next week at 4 p.m. with the Trocal session with Ritik Gupta.
Sure.
And have a nice day, everyone.
Have a nice weekend. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.